Hello, welcome back to the Peaceful Creatives podcast. I am so excited. I keep saying this and it must be so frustrating, but I'm so excited to be back recording another episode. It has been a little while since I have felt well enough to actually sit down and record, but I'm so happy that I'm feeling good today and ready to have a chat about my business and my projects that I've been booking in, and I guess just giving you a little update as well as a bit of a talk around the strategy that I use in my business to get booked up peacefully, which is exactly what I want you to do as well. And I really wanted to record this episode because I just realized a few weeks ago that I had got to this point in my business where I had got myself booked up 6 months in advance just by leveraging and using one of the busiest periods of the year. And I thought you would find it really interesting to talk through and listen to how I had done that, just in case it feels useful for you as well. So if you are listening to this podcast, I also have recorded a video over on YouTube that you can watch if you're watching. Hello, you already know that is the case. And I'm really excited to have some videos planned for YouTube as well that I'm going to be sharing over the next few weeks. I recorded a little vlog. I have got a few little very dangerous. I bought myself a whiteboard, which is dangerous because I have so many content ideas for things that I can show by doodling a little graph and looking at data, things that I can nerd out about. I hope you are doing really well as well. I know in the UK it has got really, really cold this week, so hopefully you're all wrapped up and cozy. Make yourself a nice hot drink, put your jumper on, get the heater on. If you're watching the video, I have quite rosy cheeks at the moment because I have this fan heater thing that's just blasting out heat at me, which is very necessary in Manchester at this time of year. So anyway, I think we should get into this episode. I guess I want to start by talking about what a busy period actually used to look like for me, because busy means something very, very different in my life now compared to what it might have done 8-ish years ago, because busy always ended up being, I guess, a time where I was completely stressed. I had way too much work to manage. I just knew that there was too much on my plate. I probably worked weekends and evenings and as many hours as I could to work through the workload that I had. What I essentially did was I would, when I got inquiries in, just book the projects for as soon as I possibly could. So I would fill up my schedule and then fill it even further because people would say, listen, I need this as soon as possible. Can you start next week? And I would say, yes, absolutely. Even though I had another 5-6 projects to do. And I felt like if I didn't push those dates back, if I didn't say yes, of course we can do that, the clients would disappear and they would say no. And I really, really wanted to book in the work so I could make sure that I could pay my bills and feel really good about having projects booked in as well. So when people said to me, I need this done urgently, can you start as soon as possible? Like I said, I would just say yes and book those projects in. That would lead me into a period that was actually very, very busy. So busy was exactly what it was. I would have way too much to work on. Like I said, I'd be working all of the hours. And I kind of didn't really have a system for how I could manage that busyness. I just kind of let it happen. And I thought that was what it had to be like to run a creative business or, be a freelancer or be self-employed. I assumed that busy was just part of it. We had to manage having periods where we had more work, and I didn't really consider that there was an alternative. The other thing that came from these busy periods was a very swift and dramatic fall into a quiet season, and this probably happened every time that I was in a busy period. I would have so much work that I didn't have any time to do any marketing. I had taken on all of the projects that were coming in at the time, so there was nothing to, fill up my schedule for the rest of the time. And I could have a busy period of a couple of months or a couple of weeks even sometimes that would then be followed by a period of not having any work booked in, panicking about where I was going to get new inquiries from, again, panicking and like doing some reactive marketing because I really felt like I had to book new projects. And of course, any sort of marketing can take a little bit of a while to have like to come back to you and have results. So then that would leave me with this like blank amount of time that I had no projects booked in. And it was, what I would refer to as a feast and famine cycle. And it was just endless. It was constant. This busyness that I could build up that, even though it was too much, even though it was too stressful, felt good. It felt like I was secure. It felt like my business was actually working. It always led into this period of like almost a decline, like a completely empty, quiet season that I just never felt like I could get control of. So this is then leading into what I'm talking about today, which is how I went from that cycle of feast and famine into being booked up peacefully, which is not just what I am in my own business. I've been booked up peacefully, by which I mean like with a reduced work week and, much more spacious service, and with clients who are like really, really great as well, for the past 8 years or so. And I also help my clients get booked up peacefully as well. That's what I really, really want from you as well. I want that for you if you are running a creative business. Before I jump into what this looks like for me and what this has looked like over the past few months, where I've got myself booked up for the next 6 months, it's November as I'm recording this, and I'm currently booked up until April and have been for about a month or so, I think. I kind of want to go through a few things that I really, really want you to know that are really, really normal. Whether you are in a feast and famine cycle, whether you are booked up peacefully, whether you plan to get booked up peacefully, there are a few things that I feel like we don't really talk about that are completely normal when you run probably any type of business, but specifically a creative service business. The first thing is your inquiries not being consistent. This is normal. Inquiries and interest and sales and all of those things are, first of all, they are data. Second of all, they are seasonal. Very often we don't find that we have like the exact same number of inquiries every single month or every single week. It's very rare for any creative service provider to have that level of consistency. It sometimes comes when you have like a really, really great visibility, like when you get your studio to a place where you're almost like the go-to business, which is actually leading into something else that I'm launching soon. But anyway, we'll come back to that. When you are that like go-to business, you might find that you have a volume of inquiries which can, lead to you getting booked up. However, the chances of those being, 10 inquiries every single month is very, very slim. The reason behind that is because everyone has different types of clients. If you are a wedding photographer, you're working with couples who are getting married. That's a very seasonal event. People getting engaged and starting to plan their weddings can be very seasonal. If you are, I guess, the other side of it, say like a family photographer, that again is seasonal. Maybe people want photos around like the holidays or around the summer because it's a bit easier to do these things. It's always something to consider that it's very unlikely that you're going to get very consistent inquiries throughout the year, regardless of what your marketing looks like. And however much this can feel like a negative, this is exactly why I want to record this episode, because my inquiries are never ever consistent. There are some months where I have, a couple of inquiries. I think there've even been a few months where I've had like 0 inquiries. And there are months where I have, like in this busy period I'm talking about, it can be like 10, 15, 20 inquiries that come through. And it's just how we respond to those. If I responded to the months where I get, let's say, like 15 inquiries, and I responded by booking them all in at the same time, which is what I used to do, it would lead me into one, like aggressive burnout, because that would be insane. Also, it would lead into that fallback option of like going into the quiet seasons, because all of those inquiries have been booked in at the same time. I might then go into a season where the inquiries slow down for the people that I work with. For me, everything slows down right at the end of the year because people are having time off and they're not necessarily thinking about where their business is. They're not thinking about their goals just yet. Whereas then things pick up in January when they are starting to plan the business. Sorry if you can hear a little bit of noise outside, by the way. Apparently people have decided to just like completely dig up behind my house. None of my business. Absolutely fine. So that is very normal. And again, this is why we want to have some sort of system for booking people in, because we can't really predict when people are going to get in touch. We can predict those seasons, we can predict those trends, but in terms of like the actual inquiries, it's harder to know exactly how many people you will get in at a time. Another thing that is really, really normal is clients who don't want to wait for your availability. And this is something that I think can really put people off using some sort of booking schedule or getting booked up in advance, or, booking for like 3 months ahead, 4 months ahead, etc. Is that maybe you get people who get in touch who are like, I need to get started as soon as possible. And two things can happen. Sometimes we can like stay strong to our availability and say, no, I'm sticking with this date. And then they say no. And that can be a bit of a confidence knock. It can be something that can make you feel like you can't book projects further in advance. It can also make you feel like there are people who just don't want to wait at all and make you feel like everything is that way. The other side of it is that maybe you just feel like, okay, I'll just let that slide. You can just book in as soon as possible. And then again, you get yourself into that cycle of booking all the projects at once and like starting that cycle over and over again. The other thing, just to like balance that out, the other thing that is super normal is clients who are super happy to wait. And yes, you are more likely to find those clients when you are really in tune with your messaging, with your positioning, when you know exactly who those people are. And again, that comes hand in hand with those like data points. Big nerd over here in terms of like data and numbers and trends and things like that. I am originally a mathematician, so that is just naturally part of the way that I think. But when you are really like connecting with those perfect people, it makes it so much easier for everything else to fall into place. And you will see that the clients who are like really, really keen to work with you and who maybe like get in touch in that way that's like a bit more seasonal as well, they are going to be the people that are great to work with, that are happy to wait for your availability and have like absolutely no problems with you working a little bit more peacefully as well. So I just wanted to share a few points of like, I really, really want you to know that these things are normal. And if you are noticing that your inquiries aren't super consistent, if you're noticing that people are saying no to your availability, it is normal. This happens to me as well. But it's just about attracting enough people to fill up those spaces with amazing clients. Because I mean, I can go into this in a different episode, but the people who are happy to wait are going to be the ones that are great to work with as well. So here is what I do instead of what I used to do, which is booking everything in at the same time, going through those busy periods and dropping into the quiet periods. Here is what I do instead, step by step. So the first thing is that, like I said, around those like seasons and trends and patterns, I make sure I am noticing as I move through my business what those seasons and trends and patterns look like. The more information I have about my own business, the more I understand the people that I want to work with and the way that they think and the way that they invest and the way that they get in touch, the more I can use that to get booked up, peacefully with a schedule that really works for me. Because if I know when my inquiries tend to pick up, and like I said, for me, I have my busiest period around kind of like end of summer, early like autumn, so like early September, which is what I'm going to talk about in this episode. I also seem to have a pickup inquiries in January, like I said, which is a little bit smaller than that peak, and then another one kind of before like mid-spring, maybe like April, May. I know from experience that is when my inquiries tend to pick up. If I can use those periods to get myself booked up for the whole year, that is what I would rather do, instead of trying to force people to book in when they're like not ready. And I do see this. I know it sounds a bit silly to say force people to book in, but I do see this happening. When you go through a bit of a quiet period, it is then thinking, okay, well, I'm in the middle of summer and I don't have any inquiries in. How do I encourage people to actually want to work on their website or update their copy or book in a brand shoot when they're not actually in the mood to do that right now? And that becomes a harder marketing task. Again, something we could talk about separately. So that's the first thing, is understanding those trends, understanding those patterns. If you're at a point where you don't quite have the experience to, let's say you've only been in business for 6 months and you don't even have 1 year of that data, let alone multiple years, have a think about who your people are. I used the example before about like photography clients, whatever it is that you do as a creative service provider, have a think about the people you really want to work with and when they might be thinking about investing in the service that you offer. It's really, really helpful to think about those people and what they might be thinking at any time. The next thing I do is make sure I have planned out and like very, very visible, like for me to follow to a T, a steady and peaceful booking schedule that I know my clients can book into. You can do this in a spreadsheet, you can do it in your digital calendar, you can do it in a kind of like in-person planner as well. I just find it's a little bit harder to move around. And you want to be like, make sure it's as flexible as possible. And this schedule is based on the hours I want to work, the days I want to work, the number of projects I want to balance at a time, the way my offers work and, the timelines of them, making sure that I have space for things like marketing and the tasks that I want to do on my business alongside my projects as well. Because that's the other thing that happens when you go into that really busy period, is it can feel like everything else gets left behind, right? Like you don't have time for marketing, you don't have time for literally anything else. And I want to make sure that my schedule is built around that. So that's the second thing, is having that like tangible piece of the strategy in place in that schedule. That is so important for me, because as a recovering, but like it's still there, people pleaser, I know how easy it is to go, okay, well, I know you want to work a little bit sooner, so let's start a little bit sooner than that availability. Whereas actually, if you have it on paper, when I say on paper, usually I mean on screen, if you have it there in front of you, you can see, no, this is my next availability. And I know if I don't stick to that, it's going to mean that I have to work extra hours, or I have to work over the weekend, or I have to sacrifice my marketing. And it's almost like being bold in sticking to that, but also using it as a bit of a foundation instead of just having to pluck dates out of your mind. The next thing is pricing my offers. So I can guarantee that when I have my schedule booked up, that reaches the income that I want to reach. My pricing is like super transparent. I have like very set services now because that works a little bit better for me. In the past, I've experimented with like value-based pricing and more custom projects, custom packages. But for right now, I have like very set signature services that are really, really spacious. They're priced so I can work less, with my schedule. But I also know that once I've got 6 months worth of projects booked in, that's half of the income that I want for a full year. It's always guaranteed. It means that when you do get those slots booked up, that income is also there. It's secure. It's, that is going to be a consistent part of the business. The final thing is just making sure that my boundaries around the schedule are like the most solid part of my business. I am so set on, if my next availability now, for example, is April, yes, it feels like a bit of a stretch for people to get in touch and want to book in April. But one, I know that there will be some people who are happy to wait 6 months to work with me. 2, they can always get back in touch a little bit later if they, if that's too long to wait. And 3, I guess like there's going to be more people who are happy to book in. Let's say I get to the beginning of next year, maybe 3 months is a slightly lower wait, and they'll be happy to wait for that amount of time. Like I have a buffer period of 6 months now to book my next spaces. So I feel really secure and I feel really calm in letting the schedule do the work for me. And that means the boundaries are a little bit easier to hold. So when I say I'm booking for this date, that is what I stick to. I make sure that is the boundary that I hold. And honestly, the schedule is so sacred to me. I just make sure I stick to it as much as physically possible. Okay, so I'm going to talk through the actual like data of how I booked my projects in terms of like how many inquiries came in. I have like the data over here if you can see on the video, like me looking at my screen, but I just want to make sure I get everything right. So like I said, my busy period tends to start around the end of summer, when people it makes sense for me. I tend to work with people who are in creative businesses or product businesses, or they offer a service that they themselves have their own seasonalities of being a bit more busy and a bit quieter. I work with a lot of wedding professionals. I work with a lot of people like, rental companies in weddings as well, like photographers, product-based businesses, things like that as well. I do have a wide spread of my dream clients, so it can be a little bit trickier to manage sometimes, or like to notice the patterns. But I do find that I have this busy period towards the end of summer, starting in September, when people start to plan like the rest of their year, and also come back from like holidays and things like that. So in that period, I got 12 inquiries into my inbox. These are people who all filled in my inquiry form, like in quite a bit of detail. I think I had a couple that were a bit less serious, but I've just kind of disregarded them because they just didn't go anywhere. And I can always tell when that's the case. But I had 12 inquiries that I thought were like really good prospects. Of those, I booked 8 discovery calls, 8 consultation calls. I think of the ones I didn't book, there were 2 who decided it wasn't the right time and said they were going to come back later. And there were 2 that I decided maybe just wouldn't be the best fit for me. So I passed them on to other designers, or I said like, I'm really sorry, I don't think this is the best fit project for me. Of those 8 calls, I then booked 5 projects in between October and March. So of those, I think 4 of them were in my signature service. So I've had 2 that I'm working on towards the end of this year, and then 2 that I've got booked in for the beginning of next year. And then 1 that was my website only service that was a slightly smaller project. And then on top of that, I have some other like retainer pieces booked into what I would have like as a additional slot in my schedule that I plan slightly separately. By the way, all of this I plan using the framework in my program, Book Not Busy. So if this is something that you really want to have, like this data, this strategy, I'll leave a link in the show notes to Book Not Busy. Of the extra like 3 calls that I booked in, but didn't book the project. So I had the discovery call, but didn't book the project. One of them is looking to just wait a little bit longer and potentially book later next year. One had a budget that I just couldn't make work, unfortunately, with what they were looking for. And then one I just didn't hear back from, which is fine. I don't care about inquiries ghosting me as long as they're, I get all the information I need from the call. It was a great call. I was really happy to talk to the person. They just didn't get back to me for whatever reason, and that's fine. So all of these projects get me booked up until April, which at the time of like booking the projects was around 6 months of projects, just from that one busy period of inquiries. My pricing is a lot higher than it has ever been, so that helps me have things a little bit more spacious. So if you are thinking that wouldn't fill your schedule, maybe that is the difference here. But my projects are kind of bigger investments and much longer timelines. I will say if my prices were lower, I do also think I would get more inquiries through. So I think that would address that balance. But obviously it is a little bit harder to get maybe isn't the right term, but I get a different number of inquiries because my prices are around like the 5-figure mark instead of them being lower. Like I said, that's a little bit of a trade-off, but it means I can also book fewer projects. So why does this work for me? Sorry, I'm just realizing how long this video or this podcast is becoming, but hopefully we can wrap up here. So one reason this works for me is that I don't need to book, let's say, 20 projects to fill my schedule for a few months. That was 100% the case before I started using this strategy in my business. I did have to book a lot of projects to, first of all, make sure I was earning enough, like earning the money that I wanted to make, but also just to, that was the main thing really, just to make sure that I was making that much money. So often our overworking comes to undercharging. Those two have such a close relationship, and that is something that I don't have to worry about so much with where my offer is right now. People who get in touch with me tend to know that they need to wait. I make it super, super obvious when my next availability is. I have it on my website. I put it in my Instagram bio. I think I even just have it on my inquiry form as well. And I have a tick box that says, are you happy to wait for my availability? And finally, I've got a few more, but next, my process cares for my clients whilst they wait. So I'm not just booking a project in for, March or April and then going, okay, off you go. Like, I'll see you then. I have a process that means we can have like touch points in between. There are things for them to work on. There are things that I need in between as well. So it means that waiting period feels like part of the project as well. My schedule also does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. All I really have to do is create the proposal, send the next available date, and then they can book in if they want to with, my systems and the way that works, automated invoices and things like that. So the schedule does the work for me in terms of like when I book the projects, and then my systems do a lot of work in terms of like me sending things out and getting the projects booked in. And then finally, my work week, the way that I have planned my work week alongside that schedule allows me to do more kind of like steady marketing. So I can be very consistent with the marketing that I do, which at the moment is more focused on email and Pinterest, but I go through phases of adding Instagram to that as well recently. But if you did focus more on social media marketing, you can build a schedule that creates a lot of space for that as well. So I can work on that as I'm booking the projects. So it means that even though I do have these busier periods of inquiries, I can still get inquiries coming through. If I didn't book 6 months, for example, if I only had 3 months booked in, I would still be getting inquiries throughout the periods that are, I guess, like slower. So whereas like 1 month I might get 12 inquiries, and that's like a lot for me, the following months I can probably get 2 or 3 or, somewhere in between those numbers and have those projects book in as well. So it's not like everyone has to wait 6 months or like I'm always booking that far in advance. It's just that I really like leverage that time period to make sure that I'm booking those projects further in advance or as far in advance as I can. So now I'm in a period where I feel like I have 6 months of security, of steadiness, of like a guaranteed spacious work week and schedule. So I have time for my life, so I have time for my business, and I know I have that peaceful schedule for those 6 months. Also because I have those months booked in and I have done that before, I also feel confident that I can keep booking those projects in the future. I think that's what I really love about the work we do in Book Not Busy. Not everyone in there books 6 months ahead. Some of them have done. Usually we say around 2 to 3 months. But even having that buffer, first of all, gives you space to be able to book more projects beyond that, but also gives you the confidence to know, well, I've done this once, I can do it again, which I really, really love. For me, steadiness and consistency is 100% the priority. My business was not sustainable when it was in this feast and famine cycle, but now I have more steadiness. Now I can spread my projects out, even though some people don't get in touch because they don't want to wait, or some people tell me to my face that they don't want to wait. Most people who get in touch are really great clients and they are happy to wait. And so that is what I prioritize: the steady income, steady projects, steady workload. That means my business can be more sustainable because of the secure block of projects, but also because I get to work in my best way as well. And all this can only happen by having this strategy of the booked up schedule, the booked up peacefully schedule, and the strategy that builds and kind of like designs this like steadiness and peacefulness and spaciousness into the projects and into the workload. And like I said, this is what we work on in my program, Book Not Busy. We work on building 2 to 3 months of like booked up peacefully projects with a reduced work week, 3 to 4 days or, whatever works for you. And working with really dreamy clients who are also great to work with and give you a much more peaceful workload because of that. I will hopefully be back next week with another episode. You can find me over at mentor.gattoweb.com. Just had a little bit of a refresh, so feel free to have a look at that as well. Or you can find me on Instagram at Gatto Creative Mentor. And like I said, I would love to chat if you find me over there. And in the meantime, I hope you are prioritizing your peace and feeling great in your business. And I will speak to you soon.